Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to my presentation today. So as Scott mentioned, over the past several weeks, I've been working with him to look at expenditures by recreational anglers on stocked trout fishing trips. So looking at trout on the national level, according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service latest survey, there were 7.8 million anglers who fished for trout over 63 million days in 2016. The previous 2011 survey calculated that anglers generated about $3.6 billion in trout fishing related expenditures for that year. This in turn created about $8.6 billion in economic impact, supporting over 60,800 jobs and $2.6 billion in salaries, wages, and business earnings. So anglers fishing for trout can either fish for wild trout or put-and-take trout, and put-and-take trout are produced by a variety of different hatcheries. In the U.S., there are 70 federally managed hatcheries, which produced 11.6 million rainbow trout for stocking in 1 year, according to the reports from 2006. There's not much information on production costs of put-and-take trout, as most hatcheries do a lot of work, including producing other species besides trout, so it's difficult to break down the cost of trout alone. However, the little information that does exist suggests that each catchable size trout costs about $2 to $3. So state-managed hatcheries also play an important role in producing put-and-take trout for recreational fisheries. Throughout the Mid-Atlantic Appalachian states, which includes New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia, about 9.2 million trout are produced annually from 40 state-managed hatcheries. Using the previously mentioned cost estimates, an estimated range of $18 million to $28 million is generated in trout production costs each year in this region. Maryland, which is the focal area of this study, produces about 350,000 catchable size put-and-take trout annually. A recent analysis by the Maryland DNR estimated about $1.2 million in production costs annually for the 350,000 adult trout, as well as 150,000 fingerling trout, for a total production of 500,000 trout. So state hatchery managers often face budget challenges and therefore are constantly looking for information on benefits of these costly trout stocking programs. And while the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service collects aggregate figures on trout fishing related expenditures, little information actually highlights expenditures from trips which target stocked trout specifically. So the objective of this study was to produce an estimate of expenditures and trips by anglers targeting stocked trout and to look at trip locations relative to the region of residency. So the data for our analyses were obtained from a 2016 survey of Maryland non-tidal anglers. The survey was developed with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources and was pre-tested with a group of 17 Maryland non-tidal anglers who provided feedback on the survey. The final survey was sent to a random sample of 4,284 anglers who had purchased some license permitting them to fish in Maryland non-tidal waters in 2015. The selected anglers would receive up to 4 mailings, all of which contained a web address and an invitation to complete the survey online. The 4th mailing also contained a hard copy 12-page booklet of the survey and a paid return envelope. The response rate came to 25.1%, with 962 respondents total after removing undeliverable addresses and addresses on the national change of address list. 42% of the surveys were completed using the hard copy booklet, and 58% were completed online. So from the survey, only online response data were used. While the online survey and hard copy survey were practically identical, in some questions the online survey respondents had a drop-down box to facilitate entry, while hard copy respondents did not. Therefore, when hard copy participants reported that they targeted trout, they often did not specify whether it was a wild trout species or if it was stocked trout. So to explore the validity of using only online survey responses in developing population-level estimates of stocked trout fishing trips and expenditures, a chi-square test was used to test the null hypothesis that there are no differences between online surveys and hard copy surveys. The test was completed on participation of trout fishing in 2015, resulting in a p-value of 0.25 and expenditures resulting in a p-value of 0.16. And with both test values greater than the statistically significant value of 0.05, we failed to reject the null hypothesis that there are no differences between the online and hard copy survey responses, and therefore proceeded using only online responses. So in the survey, participants were asked how many trips they took to fish for trout in 2015. The total number of trips recorded in this question was used to get population level estimates of trips and expenditures for stocked trout. Trips were also broken down by region in order to better understand where regional economic impact resulting from stock trout fishing trips is likely to take place. In order to do this, we looked at the region where home zip codes resided compared to the region where stock trout was fished for. Using the home zip codes in cities where stock trout was fished, two mean distances traveled were also calculated. One mean included trips where the home zip code and the zip code where the city where stock trout was fished were the same, and one did not. So for the year of 2015, we estimated that about 391,000 trips were taken that targeted stock trout with an associated expenditure value of $30.2 million. Of these trips, about 191,000 trips alone solely targeted stock trout with an estimated of $12.5 million in expenditures, and the other 200,000 trips targeted stock trout alongside another species with an estimated of $17.7 million in expenditures. On average, respondents traveled 87.8 miles round trip to fish for stock trout, or 110 miles excluding the short within zip code trips. When looking at trips by region, almost half of the trips targeting stock trout were taken to the western region, although only 19% of zip codes resided in this region. The central and capital regions contained the highest percentages of home zip codes at 35 and 24%, and about 32 and 16% of trips were taken to these regions respectively. About 16% of home zip codes were located outside of the state, and there were not many home zip codes or trip cities which were located in the eastern and southern regions. So from this analysis, it can be seen that anglers spending money on trips to fish for stock trout have generated about $30 million in expenditures, which creates potential for regional economic impacts to occur. Reducing or eliminating stocking could change or reduce money coming into regional economies, and hatcheries that face budget challenges produce the trout that support annual spending from anglers. Fisheries are often managed from multiple objectives, including environmental, social, and economical, and this study provides managers with information to understand the economic consequences their actions may have. I would like to thank the MSU Pearl, Scott, and Caitlin for giving me this research opportunity, as well as Chuck Yon, my advisor, and the director of the Juniata College Racetown Field Station for informing me of this opportunity. I would also like to thank Brian Richardson and Alan Heft with the Maryland DNR for discussing different aspects of the management side of hatcheries and recreational fisheries. Thank you for coming to my presentation, and I would now like to open up the floor for any questions.